Kansas City Chiefs 27, Minnesota Vikings 20. Chiefs move to 4-1. Vikings fall to 1-4. Oh, another one-score game for the Vikings here. I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Kirk Cousins did have a Hail Mary. He had a drop back for a potential Hail Mary at the end of the game.
Didn't, in fact, have the Hail Mary. Didn't get that
he
far.
locked in the 90-plus passer rating with the sack, however, and Chiefs come away with the victory.
Yeah. This was all Minnesota in terms of like every narrative they have was in this game. The Kirk Cousins Hail Mary that didn't actually happen thing protected his stats. They fumbled the ball away, I think, on the first play.
First offensive play, Josh Oliver fumbles it.
Like 10 seconds. That's now 8 lost fumbles in the season. Assuming they didn't have more in the rest of the game. Were they good for the rest of the game? Insane numbers. Just wild stuff. Alexander Mattison drops what was almost certainly a touchdown on a screen late in the game that would have tied it, I think. The touchdown that they never ended up getting.
Man, that was a beautiful play. Chris Jones, I mean, you're inviting pressure, and then Chris Jones is in there in like 0.5 seconds, and Cousins just flips it over him. And Madison had a lot of space and blockers setting up.
And Alexander Mattison is having a bad season. And I want to be careful because the guy has taken like a ridiculously uncalled for abuse, like on social media, racist abuse, like horrific things that shouldn't not be thrown towards a player, no matter how bad he is playing or what he's doing. But Madison is having a rough year in his opportunity to be the lead back after Dalvin Cook gets traded away. That didn't help. That would have been a touchdown that essentially tied the game, the tying score that the Vikings never ended up getting in the game. So really rough play for him.
I mean, it is there are some, we're not going to spend the whole show here. There's some interesting narratives about, hey, running backs are the most replaceable, and just like the Vikings have an active strategy to not invest at running back, basically, and just say, hey, next man up. And you could there are some people making the case for the Giants and how inept they look. Well, they do look that much better when they have Saquon Barkley. There are some interesting use cases out there about teams falling apart a little bit without their star running back, or perhaps when they just, kind of neglect the position. I don't want to get into that too much today. But the other big story coming out of this one, Justin Jefferson, hamstring injury. He was not on the field at the end of the game for the Vikings when they were trying to make their comeback.
2 big injuries.
And then the Travis Kelce injury to start.
Yeah, Jefferson looked like he strained a hamstring. That's bad for a guy as good as him. We talked a lot about hamstrings already on the show between us and Vic at the Friday show, but arguably the best receiver in the NFL having a hamstring problem is catastrophic for Minnesota. Having said that, really good game from Jordan Addison, who ends up essentially being the number one receiver in the game between Jefferson being kept reasonably quiet before he got hurt and then being hurt and not being on the field. Addison looked fantastic. Great route running, good speed, had some nice moves after the catch, even if ultimately once the first guy got to him, he tended to be stopped because he weighs 17 pounds. Addison is looking Puka Nacua existed, so anybody's wide receiver rankings are off. I'm pretty sure nobody had Nacua as number 1 in the entire draft, but Addison was my favorite of the big 3, and so far that's looking legit.
The big 3 being Addison, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Zay Flowers.
Quentin Johnson would have
Quentin Johnson and then Zay Flowers.
Right.
Well, because a lot of
big
people
4,
had Zay in
or call him Big 4. Either way, Addison was my favorite.
Of the first rounders. Those guys in the first round.
I mean, he was the 3rd receiver taken, and of the first round guys, he's looking like the most immediate production from them.
So the Travis Kelce injury, I mean, it looked bad at first because his reaction, right? And especially when you're watching.
Well, it's classic, like, non-contact injury is always a red flag.
Non-contact, he fired his helmet. I don't know, man. The Chiefs have I don't know what they have in the locker room at halftime. Remember Mahomes last year in the playoff? Like, they're either very dramatic in Kansas City. Or they got some good stuff in the locker room. Mm-hmm. Because Mahomes could barely walk in the first half of the playoff game last year. He just comes back and says, I'm good.
And
Kelce did the same thing. Everybody's like, is it Achilles? Is he done for the season? It's really bad. He can barely walk off the field. And he's like, I've got my helmet on, ready to go.
Now, to be fair, all of the medical Twitter people almost universally said exactly the same thing, which is that's just a low ankle sprain. It's not a problem. They'll tape it up. He'll be back. Like, it was everybody else who doesn't know what they're doing, like us, who looked at it and were like, his Achilles is gone. That's catastrophic. I honestly I think broadcasts need to put a medical guy in the booth so that when that happens, instead of going, well, let's not speculate, let's send it down to whoever who's going to ask a coach who's going to tell her nothing. Like, we can actually go, don't worry about it, guys. That's a low ankle sprain.
I saw your take yesterday on that. I saw some of the criticism of it too, right? Because the rules expert, like the rules are pretty black and white, right? Like this is a catch. This is not. They're supposed to be, right? Yeah. The injury analyst would have to go out there and be like, here's the range of outcomes, right? But it's a knee injury. The MRI could say ACL or it could say MCL. It could be 3 weeks or it could be the season.
If you watch them, though, they don't. Like, they're very, very good at actually looking at the tape and being able to tell you that generally is the mechanism for this specific thing, and that creates generally this outcome, which is a 4 to 6 week timetable. Like, you don't tend to see that many examples of them saying, don't worry about it, guys, that's a low ankle sprain. It's like, actually, it turns out it's an ACL, he's done for the year. Or even vice versa. Guys, that looks catastrophic, and it turns out it's only a bruise. You know what I mean? Their accuracy seems to be pretty good, and even if it isn't, who cares? What's the downside? It's not like they're like taking the TV dude's medical diagnosis and running with it behind the scenes. Like, I think you gain by simply, instead of 20 minutes of bullshit speculation by the people who have no idea what they're doing and the reporter who's trying to find something out that's not going to get told anything useful, you get an immediate, that's probably a low ankle sprain, they'll tape it up, he'll be back.
Yeah.
All good. I will say that's one thing that was conspicuously missing, your point on the Netflix documentary with the Mahomes and his Jordan game with the ankle in the playoffs. It's like they take him away, he goes, gets an x-ray, and then he comes back with his ankle taped up, and we never find out if there was any, lozenges consumed to potentially take the edge off that.
Just saying that, like, Kelce did not look limited at all.
No.
In the second half, and including, so a couple of the big plays in this game, right? I always look at it from the perspective of if you're trying to beat the Chiefs, who are the best team in the NFL, right? For the foreseeable future, year in, year out, they're the team to beat overall. And if you're trying to beat the Chiefs, how do you do it? The Vikings actually sacked Mahomes a couple times. He doesn't take those negative plays. Yeah. But he comes back on a 2nd and 18, throws a beautiful pass to get the first down to get it back. You get him in 3rd and 18, or again, whatever it was, blitz him, get him under pressure. He chucks it up. Now, just getting the ball out there was incredible. Defender gets his hand on the ball. Justin Watson, these are the plays that I thought were huge. Justin Watson wins at the catch point, right? So you have a 33-yard play on 3rd and 18. Impressive that Mahomes gets the ball out there. Most of the time that's probably tipped away, but Justin Watson wins at the catch point. You have another 3rd and 8, I believe it was, after Kelce's injury. You throw it up. Defender has his arms in between the ball, and actually after the ball comes down to the ground, takes the ball away from Kelce. They review it. It's a catch. Kelce had it, hits the ground, finished the catch. They called it a catch. I thought they were going to call it incomplete.
I think that should have been a turnover. I think the reason they didn't call it a turnover was simply because they didn't want it to be a turnover. So my argument would be, if he simply rips that ball out instead of takes it away, they call that an incomplete. Like, he ripped it out so quickly after them going to the ground that they would have called that you didn't have the ball for long enough. That's
for sure.
Pass. But because he took it away, they're like, well, it can't be a turnover. Like, he had it in possession and hit the turf. It's got to be a catch. Like, the fact that he was able to actually complete taking it fully away is what made them go, that can't be a turnover. If he'd ripped it out, we'd have called it incomplete.
Right. So
because he actually got hold of it himself, that's too big a swing. We can't call that a turnover. I think they genuinely balked on saying that's a full turnover by Metellus.
That's where the rules thing is weird, right? Because you're absolutely right. If Metellus rips the ball out and it hits the ground, we've been since the Calvin Johnson touchdown, right? And since Des Bryant, we'd be saying, well, he didn't complete the catch.
Right. Now,
but I heard
the line has moved. Like, you don't have to hold on to it for like a week and a half like Calvin Johnson did back in the day. Like, they've shortened that time scale rather, but this would still be within the period where that was so quickly after he hit the ground. If that ball had come out there, they would have called it incomplete and not even thought about it.
I agree. I really think so too. But what the phrase they said, well, he hit the ground, therefore the play's dead when he hits the ground.
We know that it is.
But we don't, right? But you have to finish.
Yeah.
So then it became, did Kelce hold the ball long enough while on the ground But at the same time, you obviously can't have a receiver on the ground being touched and just rip the ball away from him. So it really is the fact that the ball never hit the ground that I think changed the play.
But logically, they've essentially just said that the period he had it is not long enough to have held it for it to be a completed catch if the ball came out. But we've decided it's long enough to give him the catch because the alternative in this scenario is an actual turnover, and that feels like the worst option. It's actually interesting. They've done the one thing that the NFL is always at absolute pains to prevent happening, which is they've effectively used common sense to say the most fair outcome on this play is this is a catch because the alternative is it's an interception. And they've basically determined that in the booth, which on the one hand I applaud because I think they need to use more common sense when they're doing this stuff. On the other hand, I think if you're actually applying the rules, that's a turnover.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting one. The other call that I didn't like, I'm trying to find the spot in the game, when Kansas City went for the fourth down and they had the underthrown pass interference, which I hate generally. Where was that? Yeah, 4th and 1, Kansas City on Minnesota's 48. So they're up by 1 score, and this is what put them up by 2 scores. 4th and 1, they go for it on the Minnesota 48, 6:05 left in the game, in the third. And Mahomes kind of throws it up, and they call defensive pass interference, and they showed one replay and just brushed past it. I didn't think there was contact. I didn't think there was much contact. It was underthrown and it hit the defender. I could be off on that. I didn't like that call at all. But it's a 31-yard penalty. And again, I'm thinking of it through the lens of if you need a lot of things to go right when you face the Chiefs. And you give the Chiefs credit for these plays, right? You have Justin Watson making that play that I mentioned, Travis Kelce making that play at the catch point. But this one, underthrown pass interference for 31 yards, like if you're trying to pull the upset against the Chiefs, you kind of need those to go in your way.
Yeah, and the Chiefs,
I thought it was kind of a weak pass interference call.
Right. The Chiefs, remember, are this interesting team where in the exact opposite end of the double cheek push thing, they don't like running sneaks because they won't put Patrick Mahomes under center since he injured himself doing that. So all of their 4th and short plays are some form of trickery or pass because they won't just pile straight up the middle.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what's better than double cheek push is a 31-yard pass interference.
Well, yeah.
And that was a big part of what won the game for the Chiefs. 27-20, they get the win. They turn around quickly here, and they've got the Broncos this Thursday night as double-digit favorites at home against the lowly Broncos.